Hey, welcome back to Tuesday afternoon.
Hi everybody, it's Tuesday and today we're going to make the teacher from Little Nightmares 2. I'm going to be using Polymer Clay Original Sculpey. Using character models from the game is a great way to make sure you get every detail included. This sculpture turned out to be a whopping 44 inches tall. I want to thank everybody for their comments, their feedback, and their words of encouragement and support. I'm going to try to take what you've told me and I'm going to apply it to my videos. The teacher's head has a foil core and I use glass gems for her eyes. You can find these gems at any hobby store. They're vase fillers and sometimes used in the bottoms of aquariums. Something that I found interesting was when I was sculpting her face. Her features were quite different than I expected. One side of her face seemed fairly normal with a slightly drooping cheek, but the other side had a bulging eye and a very large cheek. It's very interesting. So if you decide to sculpt her, remember to include these features. And don't forget her smile. I think it's far more menacing than having her showing her teeth. At least, that's my opinion. I always enjoyed this character in particular because she had this intensity in her face. Or is it insanity? But I found that it is in the placement of the eyes and the placement of the head on the neck. You want the head kind of tilted down so she appears to be kind of looking out of her brow line. You need to keep all of this in mind when you're sculpting the face. So pay attention to the eyes, pay attention to the brow line. Make sure you get all the little lines around her eyes. This will help to carry that intensity that she has. At this point in the sculpting process, her face may appear long and narrow, but once you start sculpting the hair, her face will appear to broaden. Now I'm going to start modeling in the hair. I want to add a little bit of the detail around the face so I can get an idea if I have the hairline placement correct. This will allow me to make adjustments early in the sculpting process of the hair. This is a great time to refer back to the character model. Look at the volume of the hair, the placement. Just notice the very important details and make sure that you work them into your sculpture. I wasn't sure if I wanted to add the line down the middle of her face, but it is quite noticeable. And the developers wouldn't have included that feature if it wasn't important to the character. When sculpting the hair, I wanted to mimic the art style in the game. She has some noticeable stray hairs, so I wanted to make sure I included them in the sculpture. Always remember to cover your polymer clay after you're done sculpting for a session. You don't want your clay to start to crack or crumble. These are all side effects of not having your clay covered. If you're done with your head, you can go ahead and stick it in the oven. We're going to start painting next. Paint we're going to be using is acrylic. This brand is Americana and it is called Flesh Tone. I'm going to add a little bit of white pigment to the paint. This is Apple Barrel White. And I also want to add the tiniest bit of apple barrel in the color milk chocolate. On the eyes, I'm going to do 3 coats of white apple barrel paint, and then I'm going to seal that with Varathane Ultimate Polyurethane. Varathane is a great brand. It doesn't become sticky with time. It doesn't yellow. I've used it on my ornaments and my sculptures, and I couldn't recommend it more. You can buy it on Amazon. I wanted to recommend to people that they add a layer of finish over the hair because it becomes very noticeable when the hair gets bumped up against things and it takes the paint off of it. I also wanted to add that the dark spot on my wrist isn't anything, it isn't a bruise, it's just from my bracelet, and I ended up taking it off, so you'll start to see it fade as the video goes on. You'll see me here adding chalk pastel onto the face. All I did was take a stick of pastel and I used an X-Acto knife and I just shaved some of it into a powder form, and I'm using my brush and I'm applying it to the face. Here I'm just using white paint and I'm highlighting parts of the face. In the comments I got on my last video, people wanted to see longer videos. So I'm going to start including more of the sculpting process in and trying to include a majority of the painting process. If I exclude some part of the sculpting process or the painting process, it's probably because I've done it multiple times in other videos, so you might check out a similar video to the one that you were watching. So much of the paintwork and pastel I do is applying the shadow rather than relying on the room to provide the lighting for me. I'm trying to create the same ambiance in the game that can't be created in life. I want the viewer to feel as though the character just stepped out of the game. I want to recommend that you go along the hairline and add some black pastel. This will be perfect for transitioning from the hair to the skin tone. Please let me know if you have any questions. Also, let me know what you would like to see me make next. I keep a list of the things that people would like me to make. Okay, now we're done with the head. So we're going to start on the hands. And I'm going to use the technique that is easiest for me. I start out with a ball of clay and I'm just going to pull the fingers out of the clay. A lot of people will apply each finger. I kind of like to feel it as I'm shaping it, and I like to pull it out of the clay. So I noticed that she had some very large knuckles. Her hands kind of looked older. She had some lines on her hands. So there was a lot of character in them. So that's why these hands will look a little bit different, but when we paint them, they'll look really great. Don't forget to add the hole in the hand where the wire is going to be inserted so you can pose your sculpture. Here I'm just doing the general shape of the shoe and pulling her heel out from the clay. Here I've rolled out a piece of clay and I'm making the straps for the shoes. I'm going to lay them across the shoe and make sure they are the right length. Next, we're going to define the edge of the heel. I'm just going to use the side of my tool, and I'm going to take my finger and rub it so the edge is kind of rounded. I want to add a little bit of a shape to the back of the heel, so I'm going to take a strip of clay and I'm going to smooth it out. Here I'm just putting in the line where the bottom of the shoe is. Next part, we're going to define the top part of the shoe. I'm just going to make a line, and then I'm going to take a bead of clay and I'm going to smooth it out. And now we can finally add the strap to the high heel that we cut out earlier. I'm going to cut off the excess. I want a rounded edge, and I'm also going to take the clay and I'm going to create a little bump in the clay because we're going to make a buckle, and your buckle is going to fit right over that bump. Now we're going to add the hole for the prong. I'm going to take the little piece of clay and put it right in the hole. Ta-da! Don't forget to add the hole for your wire to go in so you can pose the legs. Ready to go in the oven. Once they're out of the oven, we're ready to paint. Now I'm just going to use a flesh tone on her hands, and we're going to let that layer dry. Next, we're going to add some black onto the shoe. It's a really thin layer of black paint because I want some of the white clay to show through for variation purposes. And I'm even going to come back in and I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to brush some of the black paint off later on. It's just to copy the style of the art in the Little Nightmares game. I really love how the shoes turned out. At this point, we're going to take some chalk pastel and we're going to go around where the fingernails are. And it's a brown color. And I'm just going to go around each nail. And after I do that, I would come back in with some white paint and paint over actually where the nail is. Now I'm going to go contour the knuckles and the sides of the fingers using the pastel to add shape and definition. Next, you're going to need to cut some wire for the legs and arms. Always wear eye protection when you're working with wire, and keep in mind that you want to have an extra amount of length added on to the arms and legs so it goes up inside of the polymer clay. You're going to insert some hot glue into the hole and stick your wire in. Now you're going to add some hot glue around the wire, and you're going to take your stuffing and you're going to wrap it around the wire. Now you're going to want to leave some of the wire bare. I would recommend about 2.5 inches because you can always cut off the extra, and that's what's going to go inside the body. Now you're going to take some glue and place it onto the polymer clay and take your fabric that you want for the legs, wrap it around. This is a cotton material that I'm using. You could find it in t-shirts, and I sew it up the back. Now I'm working on the neck. I wrapped 2 heavy gauge wires together and I just laid a piece of material over, and that's how I measured it out, and I painted it. Now we're going to make the stockings, and this is kind of neat. I used Sobo glue. This is archival glue, and I've made a thin layer of glue, and I just stretch the cotton material over the polymer clay, and I kind of push it into all the crevices. And I want to add in permanent wrinkles. Then I'll just cut off the extra material, and the part that is on the actual material of the leg I'll just cut off and I'll sew it up. Sobo glue came in a different bottle, but I actually put it in an old Elmer's glue bottle. I found it easier to work with, so the bottle is kind of large, so you might want to try it. I went ahead and used the same method. Put a little piece of material in between the strap and the shoe, and now I'm using some black pastel and I'm just adding a little bit of character. Probably not going to be a detail that you would notice initially looking at a sculpture, but it adds a nice transition kind of a spooky quality to the piece. I like to do this with kind of areas that have a large difference in color. At this point, I'm going to cover the buckles in a grayish black color and then add 3 layers of polyurethane over the shoes. Okay, next we're going to be sculpting the buckle, and I also at this time made the buttons, but they're so easy I didn't think I needed to add them. When making the belt buckle, I'm going to use the strap to kind of get the measurement of the inside of the buckle that's going to be removed. When I made the strap that goes around the body, I just rolled out some clay and made it really thin. I'm going to make this so it is in 2 pieces. So it's actually going to wrap all the way around the body, but there'll be a seam down the middle on the back. On the front, it's going to meet underneath the buckle, so you're not even going to see it. When you start to assemble it, you'll be able to see where the seam actually is. Now, where the strap is inside the buckle, so it does look like it's risen, I put some reinforcement under the strap. And right here, I'm just making a hole for the prong to go through. Now, when you are actually going to bake this in the oven, I actually took a piece of foil and made it the size of the body I made. And I put some parchment paper down and I actually wrapped the strap around the piece of foil, so it won't get damaged if you have parchment paper underneath it. You don't want like a shiny finish on the clay. The inside of the belt can be against the foil, but you don't want anything that's going to be seen to be laying directly on a pan. Any polymer clay that is laying directly on a pan is going to have a kind of patchy finish. It's going to be kind of a shiny finish to it, so you're going to have to sand it. That's why I always lay down parchment paper. After the belt is done baking, you can paint it. I did 3 layers of brown paint, and then I added a silver and black layer of paint onto the buckle. Her clothing is hand stitched and not removable. I actually could have stopped here and not added any shadowing or any paint onto the outfit, but I wanted it to really look like the character in the game, so I decided I would add some of the shadow and kind of emphasize the folds in the clothes. Her neck is made how I made her limbs. The thing is that it's made out of a heavy gauge wire, 2 twisted together, and that heavy gauge wire extends very far down into the body. Usually when I make a torso, I'll have a wire armature inside, but this time it is only made out of foil with polymer clay over it. What I actually did was take a dowel rod and I formed the foil around the dowel rod. Now the space where the rod is where the wires, the 2 twisted together, are going to go down inside. So you're going to want to have some foil underneath the bottom part of the dowel rod, and you're going to cover that all in clay. So after you're done just making a simple torso, you're going to remove the dowel rod. It's going to have an empty space inside, and you're going to bake that polymer clay torso in the oven. Once it's done and cooled down, you can put the hot glue down inside of it, and you're going to stick those 2 twisted wires down inside the body. This is going to add stabilization to the neck, but it will also allow it to move slightly back and forth. It's a really neat effect. I really like it. The material I used was muslin, and what I did was I laid the material over the twisted wires, and then I cut it to the correct length, and then I painted it with acrylic paint to match the flesh tone I had used on the hands and the head. After the paint dried, I sewed it up, and I took the material, the muslin, and I put it over the wire, and I glued the muslin onto the torso. and I took stuffing and I stuffed it around the wire, very tightly packed. And after it's all stuffed and you have it the length you want it, you're going to just glue the muslin onto the head. Okay, the final step I did, you don't have to do this. I added stitching to the neck. I noticed that the character in the game had some bulging areas on the neck, so I wanted to replicate that. You don't have to add pastel to it. I went ahead. I think it actually looks really good without the pastel, so it's up to you. So, here's the final result. What do you think? Do you like it? Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you like my content. I truly appreciate it. And also thank you for the comments and the feedback on my videos. Hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.